Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing an experimental video here in Civilization 7 looking to challenge what I think is the standard metagame of things as it stands right now. Right now, it seems to be the case that the very strongest start is what one of my viewers has called the Bloom start, or apparently this is referred to as the Bloom start, but it is going Groma for an expansionist attribute point, and also Gold and Sapphire Flowers, where you will gain 100 food in the capital when you spend an attribute point, an expansionist attribute point, on the tree. By doing this, you can get to 4 or 5 pop in the capital very, very quickly, and you can open something to the tune of Scout Scout into Settler Settler immediately, and you can also, if you have a really nice start with a lot of +2/+2 resources, be working 2 to 3 resources as early as the 3rd, 4th turn of the game, which is incredibly explosive and very, very, very powerful. This is the metagame that we are looking to attack, and the idea we have in mind, I think, is going to be just slightly weaker than this, but it is notable that the food from Gold and Sapphire Flowers falls off really, really hard. We did a video on how food, just generally speaking, falls off, and as you get later and later, even if you're expending more attribute points on the expansionist tree, it's really not going to be that valuable. We've done quite extensive math on this. We have a spreadsheet on it, but the main idea is that there is an exponential cost that is associated with the food required to have a growth event, and as a result of this being exponential, this means that you will have diminishing returns on flat food, but also flat food is enormously useful at the very outset of the game, again allowing you to slingshot yourself to a really strong start. The start that we are going to try and get to be just as strong or at a similar power level is going to scale quite a bit better, and so it'll be weaker at the very outset, but perhaps a little bit stronger over the course of the entire Antiquity Age, and maybe set yourself up for a better late game age. And so what we have in mind here is going a very similar bloom strategy, but instead of a food bloom, we are going to try a science bloom, where we are going to gain 50 science when we spend an attribute on the scientific tree, and then we are going to, instead of going for Groma, go for a scientific attribute point. In particular, the very first tech we will unlock will increase the power of the yields that we are working, as long as we have a reasonable looking start, and so this will be strong because we will gain access to this increased yields very, very quickly, which will hopefully offset the fact that we will not be working as many tiles as with the standard bloom start. For this, we are going to build our civilization and leader selection around this strategy. It's important to note the standard bloom strategy probably strongest for every civilization slash age or civilization slash leader pairing. In particular, it is extraordinarily strong on Isabella because you can immediately start working a bunch of wonder tiles. But what we are going to be experimenting with the science boom is we are going to be experimenting with Benjamin Franklin for a couple of reasons, but mainly is insofar as you are going to have a very explosive and strong start, Ben Franklin is going to be one of the stronger competitors in that arena because he is going to get +1 science per age on production buildings. We are going to, instead of opening Scout Scout Settler Settler, which is the standard fare for opening if you are doing a normal sort of bloom start, we are going to go Scout Scout production building, production warehouse building into Settler Settler. And so +1 science per age on production buildings is going to play quite nice because we will be getting more science yields immediately, but also +50% production towards constructing production buildings is going to mean that we are delayed less in terms of getting to our second settler, and we are going to be able to produce a production building after the second scout because of the Dotaku giving us the tech way, way, way earlier. And so there's a lot of synergy here going on with Benjamin Franklin. We will also have a couple other things going for us that are going to be directly related to our strategy. Notably, Benjamin Franklin is scientific in terms of his attribute leading, which means we are going to get events of various kinds that are going to allow us to gain, much like we get from the mechanism here, an extra scientific attribute point, and we will be able to, off the back of that, gain 50 science, which will not fall off in the same way 100 food will, and so hopefully over the course of the Antiquity Age, we can make up for a slightly slower start with this science bloom. Now, for our civilization, we are going to be partially experimenting with a civilization we haven't played yet, but one that I think will pair well with this strategy, which is the Khmer, which gets districts on rivers do not remove the natural yield of that tile, And this will be particularly good because we can build those production buildings very, very early on river tiles in order to help to propel ourselves into being a bit stronger. And it is this build order of going scout, scout, production building into settler that is going to allow us to make use of this as Khmer a little bit earlier than the standard bloom start, and so we are going to be going with the Khmer primarily for this. And also Khmer does kind of play a little bit better into going after food. Again, food is a really weak resource. It falls off really, really hard. You don't want a lot of it, and to that extent, Khmer is a little bit weaker, but the advantages Khmer has in producing food will allow it to help catch up from the standard bloom start. And so what we are going to be doing is we are going to be first doing a start with Groma and gold and sapphire flowers. We're going to show how powerful that is, and then we will show off the science bloom. We are going to look to see if we can use the same map seed, if we can, but if we can't, we're going to look for a similar power level start, re-rolling to have at least one 2/2 resource available inside the city kind of limits to allow ourselves to be rolling a decently powerful start. Notably, this is more powerful with the strategy of Groma and gold and sapphire flowers, I think, when you can get 2 or 3 of these resources. So let's get into game here. Alright, we have here a very solid, though not godlike start, where we are going to have 2+2+2 resources in the cotton and also the sheep, but we are going to, as a consequence of the way we're expanding, have to grab some suboptimal tiles. Tiles like we will likely have to improve this farm in order to get to this sheep relatively early, which is something we want to do to maximize yields. But let's get in here and let's settle and let's be off on our way on our standard bloom start, where we are going to, at the very outset here, be getting extra production towards settlers. Now this will only be useful once we start building settlers, and then it'll only be useful while we're building settlers. It is important to note that had we gotten +1 science per age on the palace and city halls, we would be getting science in a lot of different places way earlier, and so this would have its own kind of ticking advantage that would not be contingent upon producing settlers, but as we will see with this start, it's going to be really good for settlers. You see, we get a growth immediately, and we are going to choose to grow onto this river here. We're not going to work it for very long though, and we are going to be getting a scout here. So we'll pass the turn, and then we will have another growth event immediately because the food is overflowing. There's so very much of it. We'll send the scout up north, and we will grow again. We will grow down to here because the cotton is the better of the 2 resources, and then we will brick our tile here. We will evict them from working on the farm by building a urban district over it, and then we will just cancel the urban district because we're not actually interested in producing it, and instead go for another scout here. What we will do now that this tile has been bricked, now the citizen can come on over and he will work the cotton. With him working the cotton, we are in turn 2, just want to emphasize, and we are getting a 10-9 city here on turn 2. This is a result of the, bloom thing, and also the fact that we can slot in these 2/2 resources very early. This strategy for the bloom is much stronger when you have these 2/2 resources. So if we were re-rolling looking for a low roll where we didn't have any 2/2 resources, this strategy in general would be a little bit weaker, as opposed to a strategy that emphasizes getting yields. We are going to choose to get flat culture here, and something we just want to note is we are going to be using our scouts, and they are going to be scouting around. We are also going to be more likely to be working mining tiles in the iron mines and also this than the wood chopping tiles, so we are going to choose brickyard. Now here's another thing. We would be just a couple turns away if we were doing a science bloom from getting this tech. We're going to have to wait 9 turns in order to get this tech here, which incidentally is going to give us on our clay pits +1 production. We won't really be working a clay pit, but there are instances and roles and kind of opens that we can have where this plus production on clay pits in the immediate future or plus food on plantations would be very useful. Notably, we are already having 1 plantation, and so having the tech earlier would result in additional yields. So the fact that we get to work more tiles and we get to get more resources, they are going to be lower yields than if we did a science bloom. But let's come in here and just pass the turn, and we are going to continue scouting around as we produce the second scout. Alright, it is turn 5, and we already have a size 5 city hitting some critical points where we are picking up the sheep tile. So now we are on 13 and 12 in terms of our yields, with no science yields whatsoever, but this is quite a lot of production, and since we are size 5, we can now start work on our first settler. Now, we haven't had much of the way of goody huts so far. We kind of tracked along this river. We were hoping to find a good spot to settle, but weren't really finding anything too robust here. Instead, we will be scouting around, but it is important to note about the goody huts, sometimes they give flat food as an option. Flat food is actually quite powerful in the very early game, but it is less powerful with the bloom start we have gone, where we get 100 flat food at the very outset because food has diminishing returns. And so as a result of this, we are just going to choose kind of some options here. As a result of this, we have fewer opportunities for good rolls. We will choose, with just 60 accumulated influence, we will choose to not do anything in case she sends us a request, something from maybe some culture, and we will continue to scout our way through here, looking for these goody huts in order to properly kind of illustrate how some of the options on our goody huts are a little bit worse as a result of our open. But we are going to have an excellent spot for the city right down here, somewhere in there, where we are going to gain access to some of these other tiles. We have already scouted this map a little bit before. We knew that this cotton was here, and a city right here will be able to work the dates and also eventually hit the cotton and the sheep, a bunch of +2/+2 resources, very strong in the early game. We will discover Caesar as well. But we are moving our way towards settling immediately, and those settlements are going to bring us a ton of yields in the immediate future when we work the dates, when we work the sheep, when we find a better settle up here for us to go for. I think that we are going to not move around this camp in order to pick up this, and we are instead going to try and find another goody hut up here and to the left. For a diplomatic action, this is why we didn't send her any missive. We want to do plus culture for each leader, which is going to help us to move along in the cultural sphere, but we will be producing and finishing our first settler here and bringing them down into the left, and then immediately working on an additional settler. We pick up the goody hut that gives us culture as its best option, and we are going to go towards mysticism here. Musong would definitely be somewhat reasonable as well, giving +1 food on all floodplains in the settlement. I think that this is even better if we are doing the science bloom, where we are valuing getting 2 production buildings down quite quickly. And actually, for the sake of consistency, maybe we do Musong in both these instances, although I think mysticism... We'll do mysticism here, but we'll probably do Musong actually on the other run that we have available. And for our government, we will be choosing a classical republic for the ability to produce wonders and to pick up the slack a little bit on culture. It is on turn 11 that we get the pottery tech here, which is going to give us a +1 food on the plantations. This is going to be better. Obviously, the more plantations we have, we currently only have 1, and plus production on clay pits, which we are not going to have available. We will accept Hatshepsut's missive, and we will, for our second tech, have a little bit of a choice here. I do think that we are going to be constructing a brickyard relatively early, and I think that it would be reasonable for us to go saw pit reasonably early. The plus food on pastures would be kind of nice, and so we do have a little bit of an interesting choice. I think we go mines decently early, and this gives a +1 production on mines and quarries. We do have mines that we are going to guaranteed be working, and we can lean into doing this as our third mine here, where we look to construct urban buildings to get rid of these farms, work these mines in particular first, and also hit kind of the other resources we have available, move on over towards getting the mine over here, although it is a little bit out of reach, and it is going to look like just kind of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mines. We do have a lot of wood cuttering available as well, and I do think that us getting the 2 basic production buildings on both this tile and this tile do play quite well, because this allows us to work this mine over here, and so I think that we will be wanting to do those before we build a library, especially because because we are going for an altar, so we will have a reasonable shout. So what we are going to do is we are going to go animal husbandry next, with the possibility of masonry or even irrigation if we find ourselves having enough useful buildings to build. The additional settlement limit is going to allow us to expand again a little bit earlier. We will continue to move down. We haven't gotten as many goody huts as we would have liked. We do see another one down here. Our other scout is moving towards a goody hut, and we pick it up, and we see we get an option between production. This is a little over a turn's worth of production, or culture. This is several turns worth of this. I think we would like to get on to the point where we are currently having a celebration, if I recall correctly, or we have one in 20 turns. We would like to get another social policy that will give us +2 culture, and so I think we're going to let them, especially because this is not going to represent an enormous amount of construction for us here. We are going to continue to scout up and to the left, but we are going to settle this city here, and we will have a little bit of a choice. We will work this right away. That will be a fantastic tile. This is going to be giving us converted production into gold here, and also it is going to be giving us an additional resource immediately. I think that we are going to keep this here because we will be able to grow faster. The marginal food, as a result of food just generally falling off, hide your children. We're going to bring up the spreadsheet real quick. That's not the spreadsheet. That's the spreadsheet. But here we have marginal food is generally going to be less useful the more population you have. And so as a result, we are going to move into the marginal food on the town first, rather than moving it over to the capital. But what we will do in terms of our general heuristic for this is, if there was any production on this, if this was a cotton resource instead, we'd still slot it into the capital. So production in the capital, and then food in low pop towns is the current heuristic that we are going to be using as we look forward. But this is our first turn, our first settlement settled on turn 11. On to turn 12 we go, about to finish this additional settler, and so we will come in and get that on turn 12. This is looking like it's going to be a decent place for a city. We will be getting that in next turn. It'll stop our movement, so this is why we take a little bit of a look around, and I think that up here is looking pretty good for a city, maybe right here, because we will be able to work all these tiles, and notably a sheep being a 2/2 tile is going to be useful. We do have 60 with which to accept Augustus, so kind of high rolling the situation here diplomatically, getting us a whole lot of culture, which is going to be a little bit good here. And now we have our transition into building a brickyard. We're going to build a brickyard on the urban center here, and this is going to give us the food from the underlying floodplain here, because this is a floodplain, and this is the bonus of Khmer kind of coming into bear. We are going to move on up in this direction. I think that we will do this. We'll get a little bit of extra scouting. Maybe we don't come all the way up here. The faster you can settle, the better. We're not 100% sure what's going to be good here. We could do 50 gold for a population here. I don't think that that's really worth it at this juncture. So we are going to go for the 30 culture. 50 gold for a pop might be worth it, but we still have the opportunity cost of over a turn's worth of culture. And we are going to be continuing to push towards completing our brickyard or our production building, and kind of getting a basis of comparison for where these two are at. So we actually get our very first goody hut that has the option for food. This would be really good if we didn't get 100 food at the outset, especially if this is the very first goody hut we rolled. We're still going to go with the food, and it will help us to move to 6 population here, which is going to be nice as we have this coming in. We are going to choose to work, knowing that we have a brickyard coming in, we are going to choose to work this here on the gold, which incidentally is going to be really valuable for us, because the first purchase we are going to make is we are going to be purchasing on this floodplain, I think, which will require that we be able to build a fishing quay, but I think that we will be looking in general to be purchasing in this town in a general sense, but we could purchase a brickyard or something like this on this tile as well. Alright, so we hit the checkpoint we were looking for. We now have produced 2 scouts, 2 settlers, and 1 production building. It is turn 16 that we have accomplished this with the standard bloom strategy of Groma plus gold and sapphire flowers, allowing us to kind of explode the pop at the capital at the very start of the game. We have a 7 pop in our capital with a 17, 15, 2, 2 in terms of our yields, also 7 happiness here, and we are pop 3 in the town that we have produced as a bit of a benchmark, and we have 1 settler outrunning for a place to settle. Now, a key distinction that is going to be a point of difference is in terms of techs. We have 1 tech researched, and also we have 3 turns left on producing animal husbandry. This open will be behind the other in terms of options. Notably, we are at a point where we want to construct a building, and we have the altar available to construct, and also a granary available to construct. I think both of these are fine, but with Ben Franklin, we would rather be building a production building right now, which is not an option we have available to us right now that is likely going to be available on the science start. Instead, we would have to choose between a granary, here or here, looking to build it specifically on the floodplain rivers, because then you get to work for free the underlying tile, and so this is going to increase the value of buildings, and the fact that we can't build the one where we have additional production towards is going to be a little bit of a weakness here in terms of how this open has started, and so it'll remain to be seen if just how much quicker we can get or just how much slower we can get to this point with the science bloom, because it won't really matter if in 3 turns we can build the production building and the science bloom is so far behind that it's not hitting the double scout, double settler, 1 production building until turn 19 or later. So let's take a look at this same map roll, but with the science bloom start instead of this food bloom start. Alright, so we have the exact same start here, but instead we are going to have the mechanism memento and the dotaku memento, which will give us plus 50 science. Incidentally, we are going to get more science attribute points as Ben Franklin Khmer than we would expansionist attribute points. So again, a big part of this is scaling into the later age, but we will see just how much slower this is than the standard bloom start, founding our settlement straight away, and we will see the first and very most obvious thing here, which is that we get growth in 5 turns. On turn 5, we already had a size 5 population with the regular bloom start. Now we are going to have to suffer something else, but a point of difference is we are getting 6500 as the yields. As we go and push on the science immediately, we will be 65 or 7501 in particular, and so this is going to be an important point of difference. We will go for the brickyard immediately here as well, and it will be only 5 turns to produce instead of 9 turns to get to. We will get this, but now we are going to have to wait for our growth for an extended period of time as we start to work on our second scout. So it is on turn 6 right now, and we are only on a 3 population, although we are going to have a bit of a, we are going to do the same maneuver that we did before, where we are going to come here, we're going to build this, and then we are going to put the brickyard down, and the brickyard we're actually not going to delete from the queue, we're just going to kick it to the top and then kick it back down, because what we are going to be working on after the scout finishes is the brickyard, but this is going to allow us to work the cotton straight away here, which is going to be giving us decent yield. So we are on 11 and 9 here on turn 6 instead of turn 2 in the other instance, but what we do have in the capital is an additional 1 science, and we have already finished the science we've gone for already, or the first tech, and we will be in on animal husbandry now. We do have a very serious confound in the sense that while we get to roll the same map, our city-states are a little bit different as a result of our different setup, / the people we are meeting is a little bit different in terms of this experiment. We will not be able to settle our ideal second city here with Moche here, but we also have a little bit of a different play in terms of what the strategy is going to look like here. Because we are getting an earlier brickyard, I think we are going to deviate from the strategy of picking up this tile here and instead we're going to pick up this tile here, knowing that with the brickyard produced, we can later then choose to brick out this tile, and when we brick out this tile, we can work this tile and use that to get onto the wool, and by playing it like this, we can get onto the wool at the same speed as we did in the other run, but we won't have to work this inferior tile that is going to be a place that we would not want to build on over as much, because we are trying to build all of our buildings, at least at this age, on these floodplains in order to gain full access to food. So we will have a slightly different strategy here. We also have not rolled food yet. We do meet Confucius. I think we are going to take a little bit of production because we are currently on size 4 here, right? Since we are on size 4, and in fact, we should have moved this guy first. Since we are on size 4, what we are going to be able to get is we are going to get up to size 5 as a result of gaining the extra unit. So we will start work on the settler, but before we do that, we will brick this tile here by placing a granary there. We have no intention of completing the granary, but we will be able to work on a settler, and we will also be able to expand out our borders, this time picking up the river tile because we have already completed a building here. If a building's not complete, in this case the brickyard, we will not be able to pick up this river tile. Now we can pick up the river tile, so we're not stuck working the inferior farm tile, but we are a full 5 turns later than the other run. Now, to be fair, we are progressing in on our technology a little bit faster, but we are 5 turns later, where on turn 5 we had size 5 with 15, 12, and 1 as our yields. Now we have 15, 10, and 1, and 2 as the yields available to us in this run versus the other run. So a full 5 turns slower. So the other one is really, really explosive. The food bloom is really explosive, but we're hoping that we have enough staying power here and a little bit of advantages in other spheres that we can make up for it. Notably, when we do get our next growth in 5 turns, we will be gaining access to this sheep tile or this wool tile, which is a substantive portion of the power that was in the other run slash roll, where we got this on a 5 pop instead of 6 population, where only 4 of our population is, or 3 of our population is going to be from rural, or 3 of the additional population is from rural, and 1 of them is from the urban center in this brickyard. So we do roll the little bit of extra production required to complete our settler here, and now we have a choice of whether we're going north or south. I do believe the south overall had the better settles, but again, we do not have this monstrous settle right here, which would give us access to the cotton, the camels, both of these, and instead we are going to have to search for a reasonable settle that is likely going to give us the sheep here, as well as some other stuff. But this is on turn 14 that we get the first settler out, and we still have yet to gain access to the wool here, and we are going to get started on our next settler. We also don't have, from the production tree, from the attribute tree, the extra production rather towards settlers, and so this point of getting onto the 3 cities as quickly as possible, or these 3 towns rather, very much significantly slower with this start. Alright, so we hit our breakpoint where we have now produced 2 settlers, 2 scouts, 1 production building, and honestly it feels extremely close. Okay, so we're on turn 18 instead of 16. We have 6 pop and 2 pop instead of 7 and 3, and our current settler is sitting in the city instead of on its way to settle and found a new city immediately. Although, to be fair, I think we would be on 3 pop if we had the slightly better settle, where we would get to work the dates immediately. So I do think that this is a bit of confound, and we could think of it as being on 6-3 pop, but notably right here, there are some key differences in terms of our yields. Instead of 17, 15, 2, 2, 0, 7 as our yields, we have 17, 14, 1, 3, 2, 7 as our yields here. And also, very significantly, we are going to be able to, right now, build a saw pit immediately. We can build this in the urban district right here, rather than focusing on the altar and being able to make use of Ben Franklin's production advantage towards production buildings. And instead of being built on 2 techs researched, with the animal husbandry just being 3 turns away, instead we already have animal husbandry finished, and we're just 4 turns away from irrigation, making a slight deviation in the overall strategy here to go for irrigation earlier, because we knew we could swing it significantly earlier while having available buildings to build. And so what this means is what we could do is we could go production building into settler, and we maybe get our 4th settler a little bit faster with this strategy than we would with the bloom strategy, making, I think, this strategy at the very least as good as the bloom strategy at this kind of opening outset, or maybe just slightly worse, but it is going to scale better because as we get scientific attribute points over the course of this age, we are going to be able to benefit more from a Dotaku than we would be able to benefit from the bloom that just gives you 100 food in the capital, because 50 food, or 50 science rather, scales better the deeper you go into the game, and we are ready to expand even further. Now, to be fair, your first 2 settles are probably better than your 3rd settles, so the value of a 3rd town is not quite as high, but I do think that this works out and is at least competitive with the normal bloom strategy in regards to what is good, because we are not so far behind, as things have started to roll out in terms of the pop. We have 5 turns on a growth event here. We are in good shape, and we did not roll a single goody hut giving us food, which I think would have balanced things out quite a bit. The goody huts for food being more valuable when you don't have the plus 100 at the outset, and so if you do happen to high roll goody huts giving food, I think this strategy can be even stronger, but it is the value of kind of what we have going with our ability to get more scientific attributes as a result of playing on a scientific culture and with a scientific leader, and also the science bloom giving us access to production buildings, which we can produce faster as Ben Franklin, and being able to kind of go into them straight away and get a lot of production while simultaneously double dipping on the value of these kind of tiles here as a result of playing Khmer, making the having to pause instead of going scout, settler, having to pause to build a production building, making this entire thing quite a bit better, and also gaining access to the ability to build that production building earlier as a result of us going for this bloom where we have gotten 50 science at the outset. So I do think this was a little bit of an interesting experiment, and I think with scientific cultures or scientific civilizations, and also with scientific leaders, it is maybe worth considering doing this science bloom instead of kind of the more standard food bloom, because you will be able to at least have a solid start. Even if you're just a little bit slower out the gate, you do kind of play a little bit of catch up. We're still 2 turns behind, but in the grand scheme of things, I think that our 4th settle does come down a little bit faster than the regular bloom start.